Okay. Good morning and good afternoon. It's now 11 a.m., so we'll begin. We just wanted to quickly thank everyone for attending our final webinar in 2020. 2020 was full of very interesting events and especially a lot of hardships for probably everyone. So we do want to congratulate all of our attendees for making it to the end of 2020. And we wish everyone a safe and wonderful holiday season and a great kickstart to 2021. Today's webinar will be hosted by our team members, Nate and Damien, who are the experts fueling the service team, and our webinar crew, Dr. Elliott and Dr. Imam. The webinar will be recorded and sent to all attendees. And please excuse the facial masks during our webcam session, as we do want to follow COVID protocols. If you see right below the webcam, we do have a quick social media plug. Please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, where we will actually be announcing an exciting event in January of 2021. So stay tuned for that. And now, without further ado, the webinar will now begin.
Hello, everybody. This is Service Team with RioSense. I'm Damien, and this is Nate.
Hello.
All right, so this webinar is going to be a little different. We're going to have questions you can just ask in the middle, and then Zach behind camera will tell us what the questions are, and we'll go ahead and answer them during the webinar. And then, Nate, you can go ahead. Oh, sorry, sorry. We're just going to do a quick overview of the microfluidic flow channel before we start. So the way our technology works is we have a controlled flow rate, and then we have specific dimensions of the chip, so we can calculate the shear rate. And then we have 4 pressure sensors across the flow channel, and we use those pressure sensors to calculate the pressure drop. And then from using the pressure drop, we calculate the shear stress. And from knowing the shear rate and the shear stress, we're able to calculate viscosity.
All right, great. Thanks, Damien. So just so you guys can see what the flow channel looks like, Zach, do you think you could hold this up to the camera really quick just so everyone can see a flow channel? Yep, so those are our flow channels. That's what is on the inside of your chip. So yeah, just to give you guys an idea of what exactly the flow channel looks like inside. Thank you, Zach. So the first thing I want to go over is, so before you begin any microVISC measurements, usually the first thing that you need to do is get an estimate of your viscosity of your samples. So with that, we brought a few different samples that have varying viscosities. So we have a chloroform sample. So this is about 0.5 centipoise. Zach is going to put it in front of the camera so you could see about how viscous the sample is. Then next, we have an IPA sample. So this is about 2 centipoise, so about 4 times as viscous. And then here we have a 85% glycerol solution. So the glycerol solution is about 81.5 centipoise. So you can see it's a little thicker and it doesn't flow quite as easily as the chloroform or the IPA. And then finally, we have a 93% glycerol solution, which is about 260 centipoise. So you can see that it definitely has a little bit more resistance to flow as compared to even the 85% glycerol or the IPA or chloroform. And then these are the 2 samples we'll be measuring today. So we have 2 different types of syrup. So Zach will go ahead and put these up to the camera. And so each of these samples is expected to be in, so just based off of looking at the glycerol samples that we have, we would expect it to be somewhere in the range of those 2 glycerol samples. So maybe in the neighborhood of 1 to 300 centipoise. When you're estimating your viscosity, you don't have to be super exact. You just kind of want to get an idea of where you would expect it to be, just so you could choose the right chips. So that brings me into our next topic, which is choosing the right chip for your application. So essentially, there's no one size fits all chip or shear rate or testing measurements. It's all going to be dependent on what you want to test, what parameters you're looking for, and what you're hoping to accomplish with your testing. So a couple of tips that we have for you is to first figure out what shear rate you want to be testing at. So that will be dependent on the application of your sample. So for example, mixing in a tank will have a much lower shear rate than flow through a syringe needle. So the syringe needle is very small diameter, whereas mixing in a tank is a very large flow area. So you could imagine the shear rates would be pretty different just based off of those two applications. Another thing that will help you is the viscosity of your sample. So that's what the last step was for. So just knowing that each of our chips has a different viscosity range that it's rated for. And so typically, as you go up higher in viscosity, you're going to want to use larger flow channels, as well as using chips that are rated for higher pressures. So we have a few different types of chips for the microVISC. We have A, B, and C types. So A is the most sensitive and lowest pressure, so you can get more precise and repeatable readings with those low viscosity samples. Where high viscosity samples, you're going to want to veer towards a C chip, just so you can have a more robust chip that isn't as sensitive to pressure spikes. And also another factor is going to be the size of your flow channel. So each, the number after the chip type, so for example, A30, so the number in that name indicates the depth of the flow channel, or I'm sorry, the number indicates the maximum particle size of the flow channel, and the depth of that flow channel is going to be 10 times that maximum particle size. So if you're expecting to have particles in your sample, you're going to want to take that into account when choosing the flow channel size of your chip. So yeah, those are just some general tips as far as getting you started in terms of finding the right chip for your application. So now we can go ahead and get into testing. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have a chip installed in the microVISC. So this is our microVISC here. This is our special red edition microVISC that we just use for our internal testing. But most of them are a lighter orange. So here's our chip. So we already have a chip inserted. On the back of the microVISC, there's going to be a waste container. So you can see there's one right here. So this is going to collect all of your waste. Can you see this okay, Zach? Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. Great. So yeah, here's the waste container. So every now and then you're just going to want to make sure to check it. If I can. Oops, there we go. So yep, pulled it out right there, and it's already got a little bit of syrup in there. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that back in. So you just want to go ahead and check your waste container every now and then just to make sure you're not overflowing with sample. So after you have your waste container in place and your chip, you're going to want to power the unit on. So there's going to be a power switch on the side right here. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that up. And our microVISC is now on. So now that we have everything in place, we're going to want to load our sample. So I have a couple of pipettes set up already here. So we have our real syrup sample. So this is syrup without any extra additives in it. So I already loaded this one. So I'll go ahead and I loaded it with sample. So I'll go ahead and place it into the microVISC and run it. So the way we do that is we're going to take the tip of the pipette and insert it into the opening of the chip here. So once it's in the opening, we're going to go ahead and push it down until it clicks into place, and you should hear that click. You should hear and feel it click once you insert the pipette. When you're testing your samples, there's a few different options as far as what type of mode you want to use when testing. So we have auto mode and advanced mode and cleaning mode. So cleaning mode sounds pretty self-explanatory, right? It's just a matter of, that's what you're going to want to use when you're cleaning your chip after you're done testing. Auto mode will essentially just choose your shear rate for you. So it will, the microVISC will analyze your viscosity and then choose an appropriate shear and flow rate for your sample. And then advanced mode, you can specify your parameters a little bit more, so you can choose your volumes a little bit better, or you can choose what flow rate or shear rate you want to run at, things like that. For now, we're just going to go ahead and use auto mode. So the way you choose the different modes are these arrow keys on the keypad. So right now it's already set to auto mode, so I'm going to just go ahead and hit run. So once it starts, you should see the pusher block start to move towards your pipette. And once your pusher block comes into contact with the tip of your pipette, it should slow down, and it will detect that the pipette's there, and then it will go ahead and go into the measurement. So while that's measuring, I'm going to go ahead and get our second sample ready.
So we're starting to get some questions rolling in.
Oh, let's...
Our live question and answer session. So the questions are there any specific solvents that won't work with the viscometer or chip?
So Zach let us know that we have a question. I'm not sure how well you can hear him, but he is asking, or he relayed the question, are there any specific solvents that won't work with the microVISC or chip? So the microVISC and the chip are very robust as far as what type of solvents you can use. It's pretty rare that you won't be able to use a particular type of solvent. Things like HF and more aggressive organic solvents can degrade the chip over time, but it would take quite a while for that to happen. If you have any specific solvents that you're wondering about, feel free to shoot us an email or drop another question, and we can talk about that a little bit more. So it looks like the pusher block just came into contact with the pipette, and we have a reading now. So looks like the viscosity is 161.7. That was right around where we estimated as far as what we expected the sample viscosity to be. So after it's done with its measurement, you can go ahead and push this lever right here, and that will eject the pipette so you can take it out. So I'll go ahead and move the pipette here. The next sample we have is our, should we clean the chip or should we just?
Okay.
Sorry.
We have another question. Can't use high pH greater than 13 in our lab. So do we have any examples of high pH?
I'm not exactly sure right now, but if we have some specifics about the type of solvent, we could definitely look into it more. But I don't think just the pH alone would disqualify it, because we are working with plastics, so no materials that are sensitive to high pHs.
And then let's see, more questions.
Sure.
Is there so right now, is there software available for the microVISC, or is it all just in?
Yeah, so there's definitely software available for the microVISC. So the way it works is you connect your computer to the microVISC, but then you'll have a nice interface that you can use where you can more, it's a little bit more user-friendly as far as entering the parameters you want to run at, if you're using advanced mode, or exporting your data to Excel file or PDF, things like that. So yeah, we definitely have a separate software. But the microVISC is also fully capable of running standalone without any computer or software as well. Okay, so when you're loading samples, the most important thing is that you avoid bubbles when you're loading them. So especially with higher viscosity samples, you just want to make sure to withdraw the sample slowly. If you go too fast, it can sometimes create a vacuum within the pipette, and you'll get some bubbles. So we'll go ahead and load this. So I'm going to go ahead and place the pipette within the sample and withdraw very slowly. Okay.
What kind of light are you using there?
Oh, that's a great point, Zach. So when you're cleaning, so after you withdraw your sample, a lot of the time you'll have sample on the outside of your pipette. So you want to make sure that you clean the outside of the pipette with only lint-free wipes. You don't. One of the biggest enemies for the chips and I guess just the chips in general is fibers. So fibers can easily clog the flow channel since we're working with microfluidics. So you want to do as much as you can to avoid any fibers entering the flow channel.
To add to that, also any wipes that advertise as low lint count, we've also had issues with as well with clogging the flow channels. So usually Kim wipes advertise as low lint count. So yeah, we always recommend lint-free.
And we also have another question regarding what materials you can use. Can we use gel materials on microVISC?
Yeah, absolutely. So gels, you're more than welcome to run gel type materials. The biggest consideration is your maximum particle size. So as long as you don't expect any aggregation or particles greater than what the chip is rated for, it should be okay to run. As long as you have your cleaning protocol down so you don't expect or you don't run into any clogging, that's the most important thing.
Yielding. The gel materials need to flow at the end. That's in order to measure.
Yes. Yes, another thing to look out for is that the gels yield so that they actually flow and behave as a liquid. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and load this next pipette into the chip. So it's going to go ahead and prime on its own. So it should push out whatever was in the chip beforehand, especially since we're running similar samples. Another thing that we wanted to go over with these syrups is, so I mentioned that one of them is a real syrup, one's a fake syrup. So the fake syrup has xanthan gum additive in it to thicken it. So essentially that will modify the rheological properties of the sample. And the fake syrup will show shear thinning behavior. So you should expect the viscosity of this fake syrup to go down as you increase the shear rate. Whereas the real syrup here, this one doesn't have any extra modifiers. So the sample viscosity should stay the same regardless of the shear rate that you're running it. If you're interested in learning more about the syrups and how they behave, we do have an app note that you can download. We'll go ahead and share a link to that app note. I'm not exactly sure, or we'll at the end we'll tell you where you can find it. So let's go ahead and measuring this, and as soon as it's done, I'll let you know what the viscosity of this second syrup is.
So more questions. So you immediately ran the next sample after the first sample without cleaning. Is that something that you can do? Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah, absolutely. So Zach let me know of another question. Can you run one sample after another without cleaning? So it really just depends on your sample, but you definitely can as long as the samples are similar. You don't want to run something like a protein and then some type of organic sample back to back. So as long as the samples are similar, it's going to prime the chip beforehand. So it should push out whatever the last sample was. So as long as your samples are similar in makeup and nature, it should be okay to do. If you are running challenging samples and you want to be extra cautious and run a cleaning in between, you're definitely able to do that as well. It really just depends on what type of samples you're running and your experience with the sample in the past. So for this measurement, we got a viscosity of 154.6. So pretty similar to the, or 154.6 centipoise, I should say, which was pretty similar to the real syrup that we ran initially. If we were to vary the shear rates a little bit, you would definitely see the fake syrup sample viscosity change as we vary those shear rates. For the sake of time, though, we'll skip a little bit of that, and you can read more about that in our app note if you're curious. So just some of the things to look out for as far as making sure that your chip is in good, healthy shape and that your data is good. So one of the things that we look at primarily is the R-squared value of your measurements, which is reported on the screen of your microVISC. So Damien was mentioning how the viscosity is calculated. We have 4 different pressure sensors within the flow channel. So we expect a linear drop in pressure across those 4 pressure sensors. So the R² value is just how linear that fit is. So we expect values as close to 1 as possible. And generally, it could, just depending on what you're running, your expected R² can be a little different. But 0.997 is what we use for our initium instrument. So that's kind of the cutoff there, but it just really just depends on what you're looking at. But generally, your R² is going to be a good indicator of the health of your chip. So if you see a drop in your R² values over time, that would probably mean that there's sample accumulating or residue or debris building up within your chip. Another thing you can look at is the percent full scale of your measurement. So percent full scale is just a measure of how much of the chip's maximum pressure you're utilizing. So for example, 8 chips have a maximum pressure of 10,000 pascals plus or minus 2,000. So each chip is different. They can have slight variations. But essentially, so if you have a 10,000 pascal chip and you're reaching 4,000 pascals during your measurement, that would be a 40% full scale value. So we typically shoot for full scale percentages between 5 and 95%. Below 5%, you'll see a lot of noise in your measurements and a lot of variation between measurements. Above 95%, you're at risk of overpressuring your chip, which could permanently damage it. So you want to avoid those extremes and try and sit in the middle as much as possible. And then the last thing is just, if you start to see, if you're measuring similar samples and you see the viscosity values drifting or changing over time and it's just not as repeatable, that's another indicator that your chip could be clogged or, it's just not in a healthy state. So before I hand this off to Damien and he can tell you about our chip cleaning station, I just wanted to talk about some advanced protocols for microVISC chip cleaning or MV-rod cleaning as well, for that matter. So you could add a pause time before your measurement starts that will allow for your sample to relax. So for high viscosity samples, oftentimes they need to relax and return to a non-flowing state because it takes some time for them to stop flowing even after the pump stops. So sometimes it's necessary to add pause time in between your measurements to ensure that your sample is completely still before you start. Another thing, as far as cleaning is concerned, is if you're measuring very high viscosity samples, such as oils and concentrates, sometimes those viscosities can get up into the tens of thousands. So what you can do is step down in viscosity. So if you go immediately from a 10,000 centipoise sample to a 1 centipoise sample, you might see a tunneling effect within your chip, which is essentially the cleaning solvent will take the path of least resistance through your flow channel and just create a tunnel in your channel, and there will still be sample on the edges of your flow channel. So to avoid that, you can step down in viscosity to ensure that all of the previous sample is pushed out. So you can go from a 10,000 centipoise sample to 1,000 centipoise cleaning solution, which can just be a mix of your solvent and your sample, but just more dilute. And then from there, you could step down to the 1 centipoise pure cleaning solvent. So just a couple of tips to help with your cleaning. So Damien, do you want to take over and tell us about chip cleaning station?
All right.
We also have one more or another question. Is there a temperature control option?
Yeah, definitely. So Zach asked if there was a temperature control option. So there certainly is. You can control your temperature between 18 and 50 degrees Celsius. And essentially, you just place your microVISC within the temperature control chamber, and you can control your temperature within that range.
I'm gonna slide this and turn it around. All right. So I'm just gonna go in a little detail of the importance of cleaning your chip real quick. So as Nate pointed out, we just ran some syrup through this. So obviously, if you were to leave this through the chip and not do any cleaning, it would start to get hard, and then it might almost be impossible to clean out. So it's kind of the same thing with even protein samples, that the buffer that will eventually dry out over time if it's not cleaned out, and then it could lead to your chip crashing. So it pretty much means that the proteins will just stay, and then when you try to push sample through the next time, sometimes the proteins don't want to move, so they'll cause your chip to be clogged, and then you'd have to send it back to us, where we would inspect it for you and let you know what happened, and then help you get on your way with your chip. And then also, as mentioned before, always make sure to use lint-free wipes. Can't stress that enough. And then also for oils as well, you always want to find a compatible solvent. So like IPA, heptane, anything that you can that will miscible or incompatible with your solvent. And then for proteins, we recommend first doing a pass-through with your sample buffer, and then another pass-through with the quet. And then for, so just to get a little bit more detail on the quet, it's just a surfactant that'll help clean out the flow channel of the chip. All right, so now I'm gonna go into a chip cleaning station. All right, so the chip cleaning station's the automated cleaning system for your chips. So this is for microVISC chips as well as MVROC chips. So for the microVISC version, it comes with this handy dandy little clip, and all you have to do is where the pipette goes into the chip, this clip will also clip into that hole as well. And there's a little connector here, right here, where the chip plugs into. This back. All right, so as you can see on the chip cleaning station, we have 3 solvents. So usually for these 3 solvents, you want to do your sample buffer, a quet, and then you can do acetone, IPA for your drying agents, whichever one's more accessible for you. And right now, for drying, we usually recommend acetone, but we also do a service where we can help you and create your own personal protocols for the chip cleaning station. That way, it's more optimized for your use. So since we were using syrup, it's very soluble in water. So right now, we're just gonna run a quet through it and then dry it after. So it's so I'm just gonna go ahead and press start.
So some questions rolling in. Chip cleaning station.
So chip cleaning station, the whole software is built on board. So you have a touch screen, and then yeah. It's a touch screen, and then everything is accessible here that you need to do. So if you want to add solvents to it, you can add it. If you want to create more protocols, you can add it here as well. And also, if you want us to make a protocol and then send it to you, you could also import it via USB stick. Go ahead. It's a little loud, so I'm going to go ahead and slide it away from the mic. Let's see.
And then what happens if your cleaning solvent is not miscible with your sample? What then?
So if it's not miscible, what ends up happening is you could, like Nate mentioned, you could have a tunneling effect as well. Or what ends up happening is that if there's, like for instance, a protein or organic solvent, it can cause the protein to crash out. But yeah, so essentially, if you don't have any miscibility between the solvent and the sample, what can end up happening is you won't get a full cleaning, and you'll have leftover in your flow channel after the cleaning.
And how long does it take
So for the cleaning station, we have some default protocols, but for depending on the chip you use, so for A chips, we obviously want to protect the chip and not want to damage it so you can keep using it. Will take usually around 10 minutes. And then for B chips, it's around 7 minutes, and then C and E can usually be around 5 minutes. So depending on your sample, we also recommend creating like a soak protocol, so that way if you have any like hard to move or hard to get out protocols, you can dispense a certain amount of liquid, allow it to sit there, and then dispense it again, so that way it has a better time, an easier time cleaning out the sample from your chip. Right.
How much solvent is used?
So depending on what sample you're cleaning out, it varies. So for A chips, you can usually expect to see anywhere from 6 to 10 mils of sample of solvent. And then for B, C, and E chips, it usually goes around the 15 mils mark, just because for thicker viscosity samples, you will require a little bit more solvent to push it out. All right, so it's all done. You can see that. So after it does the cleaning, it runs air through the chip, and then it'll use the pressure inside, or the sensors inside, to measure the pressure and to get like an estimated flow rate of what should be outputted after the cleaning. And from there, it'll also give you an indication if you still have sample left in the chip, so you might need to run an additional cycle, or that everything went well, and you'll get a little pass letting you know that it's good to store away or to run another sample that you want to run for the day.
Another question rolling in. Can you do the soaking step in the microVISC unit itself?
Yeah, so you can also take a pipette and then run it through and then just let it sit there as well. We're actually been starting to use a new enzymatic cleaner. So if you want to test it and you can want to use it to clean out the protein, you can contact us and then we can direct you on how to get your free sample of the enzymatic cleaner. And the name of that is called Zymet Pro. So yeah, if you have any more questions about it, you can shoot us an email and then we could send you the information to get your free sample on it.
All right. Any more questions for us?
So some other questions that have rolled in. How do you figure out what your ideal cleaning solvent is? How do you experiment and figure that out?
So we do have dummy chips that we can sell as well with chips. Essentially, it's just a flow channel on a slide, so you're able to see how well the cleaning is. You could also dispense a little solvent into a small amount of the solvent and see if it's miscible and compatible, that nothing forms, no particulates as well. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think a good place to start as far as determining your cleaning solvent is just whatever the solvent of your sample is. So for example, if your samples are dissolved in chloroform, you could start with chloroform, something like that. So it's always a good place to start. Also, I know Zach hasn't asked this question, but I figure he might have just overlooked it or something, but I did get my sweatshirt on Amazon. I know that was probably a hot question, so just wanted to let you guys know.
So you mentioned that the microVISC itself has a cleaning mode, and then you have a chip cleaning station. So what are the differences between the two?
Okay, so for cleaning mode on the microVISC, it would require you to fill up a pipette with clean solvents and run it through. Depending on how many cycles of cleaning you may need to do, you might have to do multiple pipettes, so 3 to 4. And depending on the sample and your chip you're using, sometimes it'll take a while for that pipette to go. And then also if you need to use multiple solvents, it'll require more pipettes as well. And with the chip cleaning station, you can choose which solvents you're going to use as well, and then you can just set it and then make a protocol that'll work for your chip and sample, and then just hit start, and then you can walk away, come back, and then it'll be done for you, ready to store or run another sample through as well.
If I'm going to store my chip for long periods of time, should my last step be to run air through the chip and then cap it?
Yes. So the question was, after, if you're going to store the chip for a while, should you run air through? And that's also another difference between the two. So for microVISC, you can pipette air through it, but it's not as effective as using the chip cleaning station. So after running all your solvents through, there's also a drying step. As mentioned before, the last bottle over here is used as a drying enhancer. So that way, once you start drying air, it'll have an easier time drying out the tubing inside the chip cleaning station as well as your flow channel.
See if there are any more questions. What is the best way to maintain chips? And then I guess as a follow-up, because there was another question, what are the service requirements for microVISCs and microVISC chips? So it's an all-encompassing question.
Yeah, so as far as maintaining the chips, so, you know, everything we've talked about in this webinar today will help you with that. You know, just making sure that they're clean and free of fibers after testing. That's the most important thing. As far as requirements for, you know, making sure the chip is good over time, I would just keep an eye on those parameters that we mentioned earlier with the R-square at the percent full scale, and making sure that your values are repeatable and consistent. And then in addition to that, we do offer calibration services. So we recommend shipping your chips in once a year for calibration, and we can make sure that they're working in tip-top shape.
Also to add to that, you could also keep a mistraceable, you can say, I cannot say that word right now.
Yeah, so we have a NIST traceable standards. So basically you can run standard oils to your chip and check to see that you know, the viscosity that your microVISC is reading, it matches up with the expected viscosity of your oil.
Okay, so I don't think we have any more questions rolling in.
Yeah, thanks for attending, guys. We really appreciate it, and we wish you happy holidays.
Fibers are the enemy. Happy holidays.
I already.
Okay.
This light went off, right?